Hi there, my name is Kay Moon and I'm a Western astrologer and Twin Flame channel. And this is a video about the Capricorn full moon on July 21st, happening at 6:16 a.m. If you happen to be on the eastern seaboard of the United States, please check a time zone converter for your local time. This video will be for the entire Lightworker and Ascension Collective. So if that resonates for you, then you'll enjoy this deep dive. I'm doing a 4th of July American holiday special. So I mentioned it to my private list, but those of you who are not on the private list and here on YouTube, just through the remainder of this week, if you'd like to save 20% on a personal reading, you can book that with me over at kmoonastro.com. You'll see that there are spots available at the end of July. Let's get into this. The link for that and the code is just below this video. And let's get into this full moon taking place in Capricorn at that 29th degree. This is a big one, guys. So I mentioned this in what is that called? Oh my goodness. The first look for the Cancer new moon that we just had on July 5th. But this is a pretty significant full moon for all of us, mostly because of the different angles and aspects that it makes. This full moon is conjunct Pluto there at the 0 degree mark of Aquarius. Pluto deals with fear, power, control, sex, and transformation. We have a sextile to Neptune here in Pisces as well. And that Neptune and Pisces sextile is actually one of the things that's really going to help some of the tension that might arise. We have a trine to Uranus and Mars, who are in conjunction. Uranus at the tail end of Taurus, Mars here at the very beginning of Gemini. And then we have a trine to Juno, who's all about partnership, commitment, collaboration, and a square to the creation goddess down there at the 0 degree mark of Scorpio. All in all, as I was looking at this, what showed itself is an energy of dramatic change, change that's overdue. And this is not like snake shedding skin change. That's very exterior. That's the top layer. This is like if the bones had to come out of the creature, the whole skeletal structure, and then building new bone. This is the third dimension, catching up to changes that have been made inside in the earlier months of the year, where those changes have been resisted. This is the inevitable transition point that was always coming. As I mentioned, Neptune softens a bit of the blow here. Because Neptune's spiritual aspect will allow us to understand, apply some wisdom to the transformation that's unfolding, which is great. It'll allow us a wee bit of detachment. Nevertheless, the changes are big, they're significant, and they are kind of like a point of no return, if I could say it like that. This is a closing out, as I mentioned earlier, that's closing out that's already highlighted this year with the configuration of Ceres and Pholus square transiting the or squaring the transit nodal axis here. And this Ceres and Pholus thing, I've talked about it since the Virgo full moon back in Pisces season. They're not necessarily, I would even say like major asteroid TNO type planets, but the two of them working in tandem while Pluto is wrapping up in the same sign, it's this combination effect that's causing significant endings and completions over the course of this year. Ceres deals with seasons and seasonality, and specifically the harvest. But the harvest is the culmination of a season. The season is closed after the harvest. We also see Pholus here, and Pholus specifically deals with toxicity, with poison. And so the two of them rocking together all year, they're going to be with us until December in this configuration, have been having a conversation about having a look at the structures of our lives. That's Capricorn, and where we need to close out that series, things that have undermined our well being. That's Pholus. Pluto, in and of itself, is a pretty heavy hitter. Pluto's all about death, completions, endings, closures, permanent ones. Pluto resurrects, right? Comes back in a new form, but it's not the form it was before it closed out. Okay. So this is a lot about choices in many ways. We're going to talk about this in a minute. As we really cull some of the toxicity from our lives this year with some difficulty as the square to the transiting nodal axis, which is why I'm putting Ceres and Pholus back in front of you at this new moon. There's a hard 90-degree angle here between the axis of growth and Ceres and Pholus, which indicates massive change, massive transformation, and choices, decision points, whether it's figuring out a new way to be in a difficult situation that you can't necessarily leave yet, like perhaps caring for a sick relative, or the end of a difficult situation altogether. This full moon marks a definitive closure to things that have needed to change for some time. So let's take it one aspect at a time. We've got our full moon in Capricorn conjunct Pluto. That's here. This is the part that speaks to closures and completions. As Pluto deals with endings and completions of an absolute form, this is the dominant energy causing this new moon to be closure focused. Sorry, full moon to be closure focused. Full moons in and of themselves are about culminations and completions. Pluto is also about confronting our fears to access greater control over our outcomes, honoring our shame to recalibrate our inner moral compass, and noting where our rage is so that we can protect our boundaries. So, where any of those three are arising at this new moon, fear, rage, shame, take the time you need to be with their messages, and what they're signaling is your next step in the configurations of your life. Look to the house that hosts Capricorn and Aquarius to get a more personal insight into your chart. And of course, if you need me to look, you can find me at Kmoon Astro. 20% savings link or code is just below this video. This full moon is also sextile Neptune. The sextile to Neptune will allow us to have glimpses into a higher perspective about the unfoldments. We'll have these prescient moments of clarity where it's like, oh, right, this is why this is happening. I see it now. They will allow us to glance into how the changes happening now will serve us long term if we let them. This full moon, speaking to Neptune, is also what will help us dissolve, because that's what Neptune does. It can dissolve, create illusion, blur lines, blur boundaries. It's what's going to help us dissolve the circumstances that are ready to change as it stands. This reads like a gentle taking things out of your arms that you have been carrying for too long, a washing away of circumstances that are already beyond your control. Neptune can help us dissolve the pain of released attachments, lean into forgiveness, and give us the option to create new vision if we let it. To get the benefit, it's all about allowing ourselves to let go of what's already gone. And remember, this full moon is just the 3D catching up to what was already unfolding in the spiritual realm. This full moon in Capricorn is also trine Uranus conjunct Mars there. The Uranian Mars conjunction, independent of communication with Pluto, of communication with Neptune, of communication with this full moon, just on its own, is an extremely impulsive combination. It's spontaneous action. It is unthought through. It is unmeasured. It is just action without thinking. The emotions of this full moon can run very high because Pluto is involved. Whenever Pluto and the moon come together, they tend to foster deep emotional feeling. Okay. And because the emotional feeling is running high enough, the Mars Uranus combo speaking to this can cause emotions to boil over to the point where actions that needed to be taken long ago can be taken here and almost seem to come out of nowhere. It may be a bit blindsiding if you have if you are aware something needs to change and you just can't help it at this full moon. I get it. It's been a long time coming. For those of you, however, who are already moving in the direction that this year has indicated your spirit is ready to go, you'll see this full moon give you an extra boost of impetus to act on your own behalf. But for those who've perhaps, dragged their feet a little, right, on making needed changes, in particular in partnerships, because of Juno's influence, either changing the structure of a business partnership or a marriage or relationship or some other collaboration. If there's been some dragging feet around this is where some form of eruption has the possibility of happening, and that'll get things moving. It'll allow conversations to flow after. And if it erupts, trust it interpersonally. Trust that there's a reason why it bubbled over the way it did, and that it opened the framework or the doorway for some necessary conversations. Okay. Now, I mentioned that this full moon is trine Juno. So, in particular, because we see Juno in the mix, there is an indication for some that this is really exclusively and truly the resetting of relationship dynamics and structures, in particular, partnership dynamics, because she is our marriage and partnership asteroid. For some, this will be indicative of a structural ending to a partnership as you knew it. Endings are not all good, not all bad. It's just change to the structure as you knew it. So, whether it's a stage of a relationship ending, like, say, moving from dating to exclusive, or the end of a relationship itself, know that all chapter completions at this full moon are moving you onto the next chapter of your spirit story, where you'll be able to experience higher alignment and higher congruence. Okay. We also have a square to the creation goddess down here. So I want to kind of talk about that one pretty exclusively because the creation goddess is now in Pluto's home sign, Scorpio. This has been a long-term conversation. So the creation goddess retrograding back and forth at the cusp of Libra and Scorpio has been with us since the South Node began transiting Libra and left Scorpio. Okay. The creation goddess's frequency is pretty straightforward. She's about creating. But in Scorpio, she is about creating transformation that begins with closures, completions, endings, transitions. And she's been going back and forth between the sign that deals with relationships, equality, fairness, justice, equity, and then the sign that deals with sex, alchemical change, and power. So, if in any relationship, instead of equal give and take, there's been a power struggle, if instead of collaboration, there's been constant transformation, making it hard for things to get stable, it really could be this this Pluto creation goddess square, because creation goddess in Scorpio wants to end things. Pluto in and of itself wants to end things. In a squaring formation, the endings are not smooth. They take a bit of back and forth. Okay. Especially if there has been unsteady time since the 2021-2022 time frame in a relationship, end of 2021, beginning of 2022. That was the beginning of the creation goddess retrograding back and forth in this position and really locking into a tighter square with Pluto. Again, the work here isn't for us to just kind of close the door, lock the door, shut the shades, and wait for her to go away. But instead, she's trying, and Pluto is trying. The two of them are working together to evoke us having the experience of looking at what needs to transform and us taking the action to transform the things that are ready to transform. Okay. Look to the house Libra and Scorpio govern for greater clarity and greater specificity for you personally. Whatever the change has been, the writing has been on the wall with it for several years now. And your heart truly already knows the direction your feet need to travel. All right. So we're going to get into some other aspects unfolding at this new moon and full moon in a moment. I would say with this full moon, the signs who are going to feel this the most are Capricorn and Aquarius, obviously, because the full moon's at the cusp of those two signs. The opposing signs, Leo and Cancer. The squaring signs, Scorpio and Libra, and Taurus and Aries. You'll also see that the earth signs and the air signs are going to feel this very intensely, especially if you're born in the second month of your sign. So the January born Capricorns and the January born Aquarius people, the May born Taurian people, and the May born Geminis. We'll also see this for the September born Virgos and the September born Libras. Okay. More intensity for those of you who occupy those signs than any of the other signs. Okay. All right. And if you need some more direct guidance from the blueprint of your life, you can always book a reading and we can look at the details. What's happened, what's coming, when it's coming, what there is to know about what cycle's opening and what cycle is closing. The interesting thing about readings these days is that there are a lot of channeled messages coming through for people. I don't normally channel for individuals. Mostly I'm a collective channeler, but when I've sat with the readings of late, they don't always come through, but I would say about 90% of the time, people are receiving a lot of channeled messages for them for their life stream, which is interesting. So if that's something you're looking for, like a direct kind of channel from source, from spirit in that way, especially in regard to an important relationship that is accessible to me at this time and therefore accessible to you. You can book over at kmoonastro.com or the link below this video. Just make sure you use that savings code if you're booking before the end of the week that this airs. All right, so here are some other energies unfolding at this lunation, this lunar update. We have Mercury. This is interesting because Mercury is in what we as astrologers would call a yod or a yod. I think it's called a yod with Neptune and this full moon. Okay, so we see Neptune up here in Pisces. You could say because Mercury is at the 26th degree, there's also conversation here with Saturn and Nessus, even though these two aren't in conversation with each other. Mercury's in conversation with both Saturn and Neptune. And then we also see the Pluto moon configuration. With yods, what we do see as astrologers is that it's really difficult to access the planet, the apex planet. unless you can get these combinations to start working together. So the apex planet is Mercury. Mercury is consciousness and communication. It's going to be hard to get the words out while these emotions are running high, or if there's any sort of like spiritual bypass going on. The spiritual pieces, that's Pisces. And this deep emotional truth piece, that's Moon conjunct Pluto, have to be in concert with one another in order for consciousness to be accessible, thoughtfulness, communication. So I'm telling you this because you're going to run into some people over the course of this full moon period that struggle with one or the other. Maybe they struggle with deep emotion. Maybe they struggle with spirituality and higher level spiritual truths. And so, because they can't get these two talking, it's going to be hard for them to be in communication with you in a constructive way until this full moon period passes. That's okay. If you can afford some grace, that is amazing. If you can't, that's also fine too. If it's not in you to grant it, trust your life stream is the point here. And where you yourself, again, can lean into this deeper spiritual groundedness and this higher level perspective around why everything that's happening is happening, while also maintaining sovereignty and space for your deep emotions about it, you'll find that you'll have capacity with words and communication, even if other people don't. Okay. This whole full moon, it may take a little bit to, a little bit of time or a little bit of parsing through the deeper emotions to get to that grounded ability to feel the emotion without letting the emotion run the show. So if it's not accessible to you either, totally okay. Don't worry about it. It will get clearer, especially as we get into the Mercury retrograde period in August. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for clarity. Okay. Mercury is also at this time in communication with Chiron here in Aries. And they're in a conversation we as astrologers call a trine. And this will create little bits of self doubt when it comes to what you may feel guided to say, and perhaps even some self consciousness internally, or an inclination to keep what you need to say to yourself. But for those who have been eating your words for a long time, this will help you understand that there is real leadership in your vulnerability. If there's been any struggle in you between your truth and hurting other people, and you've been eating it and it's been hurting you, this particular full moon will help you understand the necessity and value of speaking your truth for both people's sake, and how you being yourself will be a liberation for both people to be all of themselves. Now, again, thematically, we're going to be getting deeper with that during the Mercury retrograde because Mercury will be in communication with Chiron throughout that process or bookending that process. Mercury is also trine sextile, this Uranus Mars square. Gosh, could you get your aspects? Yes, girl, we got it. Okay. This is a square to the Uranus Mars combo right here. So we see Uranus and Mars together. Again, it speaks a lot about some impulsivity. And then we see Mercury here. Mercury wants to be all about the words and consciousness and communication. So for some people, even if they want to hold something in, there may be an energy within you that causes it to get blurted out ironically in this energy. But if it's coming out in compensation for feeling the low self esteem influence of Chiron, and it's coming out as this kind of like compensation for feeling self doubt or rejected or abandoned, try to remain mindful that it may mindful so that it's not coming out as a manipulation of the other person. Because once certain words come out, they can be unpacked, they to add some color, but they cannot be unheard. So it will be really important to be thoughtful, if you can, about what needs to be said in your calmer moments leading up to this full moon. Because this does look some explosive energy through the end of the month. Then we have, let's talk about Venus. She's rather active here. Here's our friend Venus, and she is sitting conjunct an asteroid we call Vesta here. It's all about dedication. And we see an opposition to Chariklo here. Chariklo is all about the blessing that comes through intercession, whether it's ancestral or angelic, whatever you believe. Chariklo provides insight into that influence in our lives. We also have a sextile to Jupiter here inside of Gemini. Okay. This combination is lending itself to an exploration of self-love, as Venus is in the sign of creative authority, inner child work, and self-sovereignty. Now, Jupiter is allowing us a chance to work on loving ourselves through all things Gemini, curiosity, possibility, seeing what the options are, and trying out what can work for us without necessarily needing to commit to a singular direction just yet. Alternatively, for those of you in romantic connection that you're ready to advance, this combination always brings some warm, easy, harmonious interactions between two people. It's a great time for planning and strategizing. If you've got a wedding or a trip that you want to plan, perfect opportunity to think through the options together. It's also a beautiful time to be there for someone that you love, or let someone who loves you be there for you with Vesta in the mix. Unironically, since Venus is in a sign that has us needing to deal with the ways we love ourselves, this may be a time to show yourself a little extra love. Rather than looking out, this particular full moon may be a really helpful full moon for looking in. Rather than looking for an audience for all your thoughts and feelings, this full moon is a great time for you to provide that captive audience for all of your thoughts and feelings. Okay. And really do the self-examination work that's going to help you see who you're becoming and what you're ready to let go of. Okay. Chariklo's influence here in the sign that deals with collective consciousness and groups and friendships and technology and quantum thinking. Chariklo's influence is revealing that a lot of the spiritual support we need can happen as we tap into the collective energies of people who are also going through what we might be growing through, and the courage they're using becoming available in the collective fields at this time. It's also showing that there are some supportive friends around for the self-love journey who can have your back if you're really struggling. But in the opposition energy, you might have to reach out to them. And in some cases, they may have your highest interests in mind, but some of their counsel may conflict with some of your internal guidance. It's always great to frame a conversation with a friend with, I need you to listen, or I need you to provide advice, or do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to share input? In doing that, you can have a more productive conversation at a full moon when tensions are just running to the max, running really high. Okay. So, one of the things I'll also say in closing to that segment is that you want to be patient with yourself and lean into your discernment so that what's right for you versus what's next and on your highest path is really clear. Okay. And then lastly, we see this Saturn Nessus conjunction in square to our lovely Jupiter in Gemini here. And this combination is what This is in part if there is some tension between the old and your new in life, and sorry, in your life, this is where it's going to come from. Um, in part also Pluto retrograding back into the old before a long 20-year stay in the new. This Jupiter square Saturn tension really shows itself as one foot in the new, or maybe like both feet and a hand in the new, while there's still a hand gripping onto the old. And so there's a real calling as we move through this full moon energy, as it peaks from here and then wanes after the 21st, to really have a look at, why am I holding on to certain things? Am I holding on because it validates my ego? Am I holding on because I'm afraid of what's next? Am I holding on because I think other people need me to? And am I only holding on to their old then because I've made up a story about what they need? All in all, because we're going to see next year Neptune jump into a new sign after a long stay in Pisces. We're going to see Jupiter jump into a new sign, Uranus jump into a new sign, and Pluto jump into and settle into its new sign. All the heavy hitters who facilitate the structure of our lives, and have been in some of the positions they've been in for a decade, roughly, or more, except for Jupiter. Jupiter's about a sign a year. This is significant foundational structural change. This is not giving the house a facelift. This is gutting it completely and rebuilding something on the site. And so our lives are in the process of doing this while the world is also doing this simultaneously. So where there has been a clinging to the old at this full moon and some of the new moons that we really see going into the tail half of this year, you're going to see some of the consequences of holding on to the old. There's just no space in that two-car garage for the new car if all the spots are already taken up. And so you want to give yourself some opportunity to really do the self-reflection and have a look. Where can I realign the structures of my life to my own spiritual truth, that's Saturn and Pisces, and explore the options for allowing myself to move forward into the new, that's Jupiter in Gemini. The more you allow yourself to explore the options and then harness this Mars Uranus, like if you get an itch or a impulse to just try something new, just get out there and do it at this time. Run with it. It's not coming for no reason. This energy is really trying to shake the cobwebs off of places in our lives where we may have fallen into ruts and routines that we have long since outgrown. Okay. The upcoming Mercury retrograde, just so you guys have those dates, is August 4th through August 27th. With the shadow period underway, as we get to the height of this full moon, the shadow period begins on July 16th. So from July 16th to August 4th, the themes that we experience will be up for some level of clarification and deeper dives throughout that 4th through 27th retrograde period. Again, it looks like a great time for communication, for deeper self work, inner reflection, therapy coaching, counseling, but also really having those necessary conversations to reset structures, reset boundaries in your third dimension, so that your third dimension can start to be a reflection of the spiritual changes you've made in the last 3 years. All right. Now, let us take a look. I do something called first look at the end of every lunar update. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Leo new moon on August 4th. So we'll have this retrograde starting exactly at the Leo new moon. So that's significant as well, the Mars retrograde. So let me reshare screen. New moon in Leo. Make sure y'all can see it. Okay, you should be able to see it. Okay, and if you need any help unpacking these energies, you know where to find me. New moon in Leo, August 4th, 7:12 a.m. Check a time zone converter for your local time. It's my first impression of this. So we see the new moon here at that 12th degree of Leo. Uh, who are you in communication with? Let's move around this wheel and find out. We see direct communication with Cheroklo. Okay, so we've got an opposition there. We also see, hmm, okay. Only communication I'm spotting in a real way at this time is this Mars now Jupiter conjunction. So we're going to move out of the energy of the Mars Uranus conjunction relatively quickly. So if there's any sort of like eruption that takes place as we come out of or into that Capricorn full moon, this Mars Jupiter is going to start to look for solutions relatively quickly as we get into the Leo full moon at the top of August. Looks like later on this day, we'll see Mercury going retrograde and beginning that retrograde cycle from the 4th degree of Virgo. Mercury, again, just to reiterate, going to be retrograde until August 27th. And we'll be moving backwards here through Leo and then forwards again. This, I like this because it seems to be indicative of some cleanup. I almost want to call this new moon in Leo like damage control after the full moon in Capricorn that we're about to walk into, because it does look like it's a very solution oriented new moon. It looks like it is an extraordinarily focused on what are the options, how do I take steps. It's action oriented in certain ways. It is high fire. It's also high fixed, interestingly enough. Um, for those, I mean, if you all know that there's something you're in, a job, a home, a city or a state or country, a project, a relationship that you know isn't working. It has not been working. Um, there will be some opportunity. I'm just going to lay it out here with this much fixed energy for you to try to sustain the status quo. But I caution you that would be a mistake because as Uranus moves into Gemini, Neptune butts into Aries, and Pluto settles into Aquarius next year. This is when you're going to see some real consequences to trying to hold on to the old. This energy is really trying to establish you in the new place in your life. Um, and so rather than scrambling to clean up any fallout from the Capricorn full moon, this is your opportunity to take what happened at the Capricorn full moon, if anything, as a signal, whether even if it was just internal turmoil or external upheaval, this would be your opportunity to say, writing's on the wall. I've got to move. I've got to resituate myself in life. This chapter is done. Okay. And this new moon in Leo does seem to really give us that opportunity for self honoring, self sovereignty, really digging into that self love and tending to our own inner child by taking, again, actions that allow us to explore what's next and what's new. That's Mars, that's Jupiter in Gemini in harmony with this new moon. And of course, again, we have that intercessional support from Cheroklo, whether you believe it's angels or ancestors or spirit guides, or the Holy Spirit, it is absolutely there in a very loud way at this new moon. But you're going to have to be willing to balance the shadow side of Leo, which is ego, in order to be attuned to spirit's guidance. Okay, guys, that's what I got. Thanks so much for liking, watching, subscribing, and sharing. This is where the energy moves, and I look forward to reading for you at the end of July. Take great care, and bye for now.